Hi everyone and welcome to ScIQ. We're just shooting today. We're here at the YouTube space in New York. Everyone's just gone off on a quick lunch break, but I wanted to quickly film this video to respond to the horribly tragic shooting that's just happened in California. I want you to imagine what would happen if in America there was a disease that broke out that killed 30,000 people in just 1 year and left 80,000 more injured. Now imagine that disease would go on to end the lives of 1 in 100 Americans. Can you imagine what the outcry would be? The CDC would go crazy. Doctors and public health officials would be doing everything that they could to stop that horrible disease from spreading. And we do actually have that disease. It's called gun violence. Just in the last 24 hours, more than a dozen people have lost their lives to gun violence. But what we haven't heard about is all of the suicides and homicides and accidental shootings that also will have happened in the last 24 hours. Literally hundreds and then thousands every year. But the thing is, this is a public health issue, and it's interesting because the American Health Association are starting to think of gun violence not as a political issue, but as a public health risk. At their general meeting last month, health services researcher Judith Katzburg had this to say: "Gun violence at the end of the day has been looked at too long through a political lens. It's a public health issue, and it's one of the most pressing public health issues facing our country today." Now, here's the interesting thing about this. We all know that Congress isn't going to do anything about gun violence anytime soon, but if a public health agency decided that gun violence was a public health issue, they could take on the challenge and start creating rules around guns without waiting for Congress to do anything. And if you think I'm talking crazy, this has actually happened before. In the 1960s, when air pollution was getting out of hand and people were polluting without any regulation, Congress created the Clean Air Act and also the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA. They basically made a rule in the Clean Air Act that said the air should be clean and you can't pollute it. And exactly how clean and how much you can pollute, we're going to leave that to the EPA to decide and to enforce. And then the EPA is actually the federal agency responsible for coming up with the rules and then enforcing and regulating. Now, the really interesting part is that under the Public Health Service Act, the Center for Disease Control and the Department of Health and Human Services both have Congress's authority to do what they need to do to stop public health risks from spreading. They're both authorized to take whatever measures they deem necessary to protect the health and safety of American citizens, including locking people up in enforced quarantine. Now, no one seriously thinks that the CDC is going to start locking up gun owners, but it's such an interesting thought. Wouldn't it be interesting if the CDC or another federal agency declared gun violence a public health risk and started acting on their own without the authorization of Congress to do something about it? That may not ever happen, but it's such a tantalizing thought, and heaven knows we have waited long enough for Congress.